Hi and welcome to my reflection video. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I am creating this video from the unceded territories of the Lekwungen or Songhees people who have lived and thrived on these lands, and to acknowledge the diverse cultures of the people who have lived on these lands. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that although that I am producing this as a virtual reflection, this video is also connected to nature, because in order to produce it we have to reuse materials that also come from the lands, so we are never separated from nature even when creating a virtual reflection like this. I'd finally like to mention that I am creating this video from a small apartment, and there may be interruptions as I am in a shared space, so hopefully I will be able to continue this production, but I had to use some maker mentality to create this piece because I really wanted to show so many elements of reflection over the last week, all the learning that took place, and it's difficult because to do that I would have to create this big video with lots of materials and everything, but instead I had to sort of compile it. So using my maker mentality, I have created this mind map that you can see on my screen, and I was hoping that it will sort of summarize everything that took place, and I will explain it now in this video. Okay, so opening up to our presenter view of Coggle, I just wanted to explain the color scheme of this mind map. So in blue, and the centerpiece of this mind map is my 3 goals that I created at the beginning of this course. I wanted to see how I connected to these 3 goals and how I've worked to accomplish them in the last 3 weeks. So those are the main central area of my mind map. And then from each of these goals, I will go into how I have played and experimented, what I've done to reduce makerspace anxiety, and then what I've done to create a makerspace lesson for adults. In other colors, I've got how I have connected to the EDIDA framework over the week throughout these activities, and then in red I have a few interesting aha moments that I discovered through the week. So starting right in here with the pink section, which was my play with purpose. So this is all the activities that we did during the Maker Week. I'd like to just talk a little bit about the microbits piece that we worked on, both with Tess Sutherland of Pingwalk and with Cameron Beck of Science World. These lessons, I really liked using these tools. They're really affordable, and they're really neat to see how many ideas you could come up with. And we actually, as a group, my group, produced an idea that we could then use in our lesson later on. Interestingly, we found I associated parts of the lesson with inclusivity, in that they have sort of a low floor, high ceilings. There's lots of small activities, or you can expand to many deeper ideas with these little tools, but also that you have to be wary of the language that you use when teaching anything like this, because something like the term a dongle was used and one of my group members had no idea what it was, and it just sort of brought up a lot of the anxiety that I talk about in one of my other pieces. So you really have to watch what language you use when you're teaching with these pieces of equipment. I also went into much detail about the field trip in my reflection section, so I won't go into too much detail here. It really made me think about the materials used to make a ruler, what a ruler even, the meaning of using a ruler is. Like, is it the only way to measure things? There's lots of other ways of thinking. And also, just the field trip itself, the connections to neighborhood, whether or not, or the steps that the Makerspace or the Maker Labs have done to bring equity for women in their spaces. We also have the initial goose chase activity, which was a fun way to get to know my group. I think we actually really had a growth mindset coming up with activities. It was a great way to have creativity in a short period of time. We also had VR experiences, which are very experiential learning, which is a first principle of learning, which I really enjoyed. We were all very wowed by just a very simple piece of equipment, just made out of cardboard. That was enough to have an experiential learning moment, which is really, I think it's important for adults as well as children, so that's a great takeaway. I also found that the group maker presentations, it was really fun to actually get down and use my hands to work on things. I thought it was fascinating that some of the teams, even though they were teachers of children, they produced lessons for adults using their hands, which is sort of my goal as well in this, was my goal this week, was to create lessons for adults. So it was interesting to see other people doing the same thing, just using recycling and hands-on learning. Moving on to the yellow section, which is related to creating a makerspace lesson for adults. I was really impressed that there were so many activities that we did during the week that I could connect right away to an actual lesson that I saw was really practical and topical for adults. I think we really addressed decolonization by producing a unit of learning that used Indigenous practices, a holistic look at mental health, rather than going for the traditional colonial look at separation of mind and body when treating mental health. So that we could take the activities that we learned from this week and apply them right to create a really useful lesson was just, it really amazed me. And finally, and really importantly to me, was to reduce makerspace anxiety. So to me, this is just the anxiety that is felt by people who don't normally work with STEAM subjects, who may not have as much exposure to technology. I myself have had an experience with a makey, which I really reflected on. I really felt this week that there's lots of safe spaces to fail and to try again. I had a really supportive group. There was lots of moments for peer learning. Just to take a moment to talk about a few of the aha moments that I had this week. One of which was to do with the provocation, which sort of pointed out to me that it's really hard to be aware of your own biases. You can look into my provocation to see more about that. But this also came up when I was watching one of the group presentations. It was a really great presentation. And then in the reflection of that presentation, I think we all became aware that it's really even difficult to notice when we think that a lesson like science is neutral, but there's actually inherent biases in pretty much all lessons, and so it's important to try to be aware of them. So I sort of reflected on that in lessons and activities after doing that provocation. But also that I identified throughout the week that a makerspace can be many things. I sort of learned this doing my critical learning tasks, but it really became clear to me through the activities we did this week that there's so many definitions to what a makerspace can be. I think we even surprised our instructors by creating a lesson that used yoga and used our bodies for making. And I really liked what Joyce and Joe Kwan said during their presentation about that we are all makers, or to presume confidence, because I think that if you look at making as so many different tasks, then anybody can do it. We just have to give the opportunity. And finally, I can talk about one of the aha moments that occurred when we did the Google Teachable Machine. So we learned it earlier on in the week. Thought it was a really neat tool, that it sort of mimics what you're doing and sort of understands what you're doing, and that we thought we could use it for poses later on in our exercise. But we actually discovered later that the Teachable Machine can be biased in that if it looks at one person and then looks at a different type of person, it might actually not recognize their movement. So it was interesting to see that there was still a bias in Google's programming. So that was an interesting moment to see. So I was really impressed at how well I was able to connect our activities with my goals. I think I'm already moving towards really realizing these goals, and I've done so much towards them already this week. I sort of created them with the hopes of getting there, but I'm already working on them, and I think that is just amazing. I think a final takeaway for me is that I feel like I finally have the confidence to call myself a maker. I now feel like I can in turn pass this confidence on to other adults by providing meaningful and inclusive lessons while paying attention to personal biases and trying to really be open to input from people from other cultures and ways of knowing, and allowing this to influence my work. To finish up, I wanted to say this has been an incredible experience. I've learned so much, I've tried so many new things, and I've had a really great time. Thanks so much to Dr. Carrie Ewert and to Dr. Andrea Sater for all their amazing work, and for all their helpers for creating this Maker Institute for us. Thanks.